Thank you, everyone, for joining us. My name is Matthew Galuzzo. I am Riverlife's president and CEO. Quick note, this session is being recorded so that we can post it to various sites when we've concluded. And so just note that moving forward, be on your best behavior. Just to set a little bit of context, as folks on this call may or may not know, Riverlife, when I started with the organization 3.5 years ago, started a process to complete the loop, which is a 15-mile, 1,000+ acre geography that extends from the Hot Metal Bridge on the Monongahela down to the West End Bridge on the Ohio and up to the 31st Street Bridge on the Allegheny, a sort of loop. And the history of Riverlife is really focused on enhancing that experience and completing the physical gaps. And our Completing the Loop plan, which actually some folks on the call may have seen last week, just won the National AIA Awards for Urban Design, really speaks to the importance of experience and of completing that experience. And that means in some cases addressing parks and open spaces that have been loved to death. And so, like Allegheny Landing, which is behind me, Riverlife has a stake to claim to leading the repositioning of this park and its sister park across the bridge, Allegheny Riverfront Park. We are incredibly excited by the prospect of that repositioning and have considerable momentum with that process. We are grateful to our partners at the City of Pittsburgh. These are city parks that we're working with. And in the case of Allegheny Riverfront Park, really grateful for the continued partnership with the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, and many of their team members are on this call today. For today, we are really going to continue a conversation that we really picked up in earnest in December with a series of meetings to really begin setting preferences for what would happen in Allegheny Riverfront Park. As folks will learn throughout this call, this is an important cultural landscape. So honoring its history, but also setting it up for a 21st century context and the needs of a downtown that have rapidly changed even in the last 3 years is of paramount importance. And so I want to set that as a context. I also want to say thank you again to each of you for making time out of your busy calendars to go with it. To go along with us. At this point, I will hand the microphone over to our Riverlife's Director of Planning and Projects, Gavin White, who will take us further into this conversation.
Thanks, Matt. So I just really quickly want to set the stage in terms of process to date for those who haven't been a part of it and give you a little bit of context, right? Matt just talked about the loop. Here we have a lovely picture of the Golden Triangle. On the left side is the park we're talking about today, Allegheny Riverfront Park. And it's a 2-level park. It has a lower level that consists of the Riverfront Trail and a number of landscape features along the water's edge, and an upper plaza, which really sits at that city interface and will be the focus of our conversation today, though we are thinking broadly about its context, about the lower and level and its connections to other parts of the loop as well. We, in 2020, went through a process of understanding the sort of needs from a really basic level for this park with partners, and I'll talk about that in a moment. Matt's gone through the introductions, and I want to share some of those guiding principles. And then we'll turn it over to our landscape architects, Michael Van Valkenburgh Associates and LaQuatra Bonci Associates, to walk you through these designs and what we've heard so far in the design process. So in terms of that sort of organizing effort, we did work with our partners at the Pittsburgh Cultural Trust, at the City of Pittsburgh, at the Pittsburgh Downtown Partnership, and with other stakeholders to understand what it really was we were trying to get out of this restoration or recreation of this park. And so some things, and I'm sure most of you can read these, but I'm going to read through them just in case. because they're really important sort of guiding principles for the work moving forward. So we want to embody social equity in the engagement, design, programming, and operations of this park to provide a welcoming experience for all. We want to enhance the shoreline experience and park benefits for neighborhood residents. So those neighborhood residents really being the downtown residents who are growing in number every year. We want to connect the park with downtown, particularly the cultural district, which it sort of serves as their front door, but also Point State Park, the convention center, and the bridges across to the north side, and the new Pop District and PNC Park and other amenities. We want to improve the physical and social safety, and that could include visitor services, things happening in the park when it's recreated, but also should be thoughtful. The design should be thoughtful about those needs as well. We know we saw some issues there last year, and we really think that a renewed park and a better program park will be a much safer, more inviting space for this part of downtown. We want to respect the park's original design, right? It's sort of an innovative design that people study in landscape architecture school because of the challenges, and you'll see some of those challenges today. And we've thought a little bit about adhering to the Secretary of the Interior's treatment standards for historic preservation, for restoration, or in this case, rehabilitation. We want to include public art of high quality, as they did in the first design, and integrate that with design processes. So we're thinking about ways to maybe include that in the paving again, or in the lighting, and we'll talk about that later. We want to incorporate urban ecology and sustainability. We want to anticipate climate change impacts, so we are trying to be as mindful as possible about tree canopy, about stormwater management, and those other details. We want to establish an economically sustainable maintenance program in partnership with the city. Their standard services with a formal operating and maintenance agreement. That's a pretty wordy one, but suffice it to say that there are things that deteriorated in this park because of the material themselves, but also because of the care that they received or did not. And we want to make sure that we're bringing additional resources to this space to make sure that whatever gets improved lasts. And then finally, we want to ensure a transportation network with highway and arterial connections that is efficient and calibrated to changing needs. And that's being mindful of the fact that this park is between two major thoroughfares, which are important for downtown connectivity, but that especially in future phases may be able to be right-sized in order to accommodate even more in this public space. So that was our sort of ground plane for getting this process started. And then we've gone through some work with the landscape architects here today and heard from you all in a previous session in November. And Laura will I think, take it from here and talk about what we've heard to date.
Well, we hope she will. Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. I can see that there are over 50 participants, and that just speaks to how Pittsburgh citizens really care about their city. As Gavin mentioned, we had a meeting in early December where we talked with both the community and stakeholders. And from those collective meetings, this is what we heard from you. And interestingly, all of these seem to be wrapped in the 10 principles that Gavin just went over, but I'll go over them quickly. And then after that, we're going to take a look backward just a little bit at what the park was in its beginning days, and then move on to the looking at the revised design. So better connection to the city, visually and physically. Events and programming are important. Safety, both physically and psychologically, are critical. The park needs to be universally accessible for everyone. The shade trees are much loved, but we do need to think about their density. The paving, there was a lot of discussion about that. Of course, it's not in great shape right now. So we need a paving that's going to be more durable and less hazardous for walking. People wanted to see improved seating and options for that. And there was discussion about special lighting and also fixing the existing lights. And of course, everybody comments on the traffic din from both Fort Duquesne Boulevard and the 10th Street bypass. And last, the park needs to be well maintained. So I wanted to just take you back a little bit. Some of you have seen this part of the presentation before, so we took a small snippet of it just to put things in context for everybody, especially those who didn't get a chance to come to the December meeting. So here's the landscape plan of the upper level park. And as Gavin said, the lower level and the upper level can you still hear me? Okay, sorry, a signal came up. So the lower level and the upper level were actually conceived together, but today we're here to talk about the upper level park. And there are really two parts to that. One is from 6th to 7th Street, and the other is from 7th to 9th Street. And just like we have the Three Sisters bridges, these are sisters, or maybe brothers as well. So they're really identical to each other. They're spatially the same. So what were the design ambitions for the upper level park back when we started it in 1998? One was to provide a visual connection between the city and the river, a place where people can really have a chance to enjoy the magnificence of the Allegheny River. We wanted the upper level parks to be a threshold for the lower level parks and also the river. Provide a green corridor at the edge of the city that would be human scale and sort of soften its appearance. Some of you have been in the city long enough to remember that it was just a really narrow sidewalk against the river's edge. We also wanted to provide a place for strolling and respite, as well as a meeting ground, and then incorporating art into the urban experience, particularly since we are in the cultural district, was a really important aspect. Just a quick look at what the upper level park was before 1998 and what it's become. And so these are two sections. So looking at the top one, there used to be next to the 10th Street bypass. So this is the 10th Street bypass, as you know, sunken down. And the upper level park was once just a 6-foot wide sidewalk, as you can see on the photograph in the right-hand side. But there was quite a bit of space within the median. And so truthfully, Cultural Trust, who was our client at the time, had the brilliant idea to kind of take some of that green space in the median and move it to the edge of the 10th Street bypass so that we could have a civic space, a place where people could really come and experience the city and the river. This is what the park looked like a few years after it was completed. As you can see, it's heavily treed. There's places for people to sit and a way to look out at the river. Just another view of people enjoying the park in warmer days. But this is the reality of the upper level park today. It's seen better times. And we're here to make sure that the park gets a refresh, keeping the principles that guided us in the beginning, and that we, start to fill in some of those principles as well as goals that everyone has expressed. So one of the things about the upper level park that has become just a bit of a barrier is this low retaining wall that was built right next to Fort Duquesne Boulevard. And it's a low wall, however, and it was installed so that we could get enough room to plant trees in this area, because it's an urban space and it's close to the highway. There really wasn't a whole lot of depth in order to put trees in. So we raised up the park. But in doing so, we also sort of unintentionally maybe created a difficulty seeing in. One of the most apparent aspects of the park today is the condition of the pavement. And some of you may not know, but Ann Hamilton, the artist, was a partner of ours on both the upper and lower level park. And Ann's contribution was the paving pattern that unfortunately has not worn well as vehicles have gone over it, et cetera. Additionally, there have been problems with the drainage, which has created pools of water and therefore mud at times. And as we heard from so many of you, not only is this not how you want the park to look, but also it's very difficult to traverse through it. And that's a concern of everybody. So we've spent the last couple of months looking at how we could create a new landscape plan. And some of you may not know this, but my office, of course, were the original landscape architects, but even more amazing, I was one of the landscape architects, very young in my career then, very August now. And so I worked on this project with Michael Van Valkenburgh and Matthew Urbanski. And this was a real labor of love for us. It was just a project that kind of put our firm on the map and also just gave us a chance to really take tough conditions and try to make them a public landscape. So this is the plan all the way from 6th to 9th Street. Again, these two sides of the park are identical. What I'm going to do is go through a series of diagrams and some sketches that better explain exactly what we've done to the park. So let me start with that. So this is a close-up of the plan. So we're just looking at one section from 7th to 9th Street. We have kept almost all of the trees. We have created islands on the end, which I'll talk about later, in order to provide some views in. And we have an updated and sturdier version of the pavement that was created by Anne. Some parts of the park remain exactly the same, the long bench, but we've added other things to meet some of the goals that we've all talked about. So this is one of two diagrams that I'm going to kind of take you through the plan to show you what we've done. First of all, just keep in mind that the total park length is about 500 feet or so. So it's fairly long. And back to that wall, which is the yellow and the red dash, what we've done in order to create more visibility and accessibility into the park is we are going to take off about 85 feet on each end. So that means, 170 feet less wall for each park section. And as you'll see in future sketches, this really helps to open up the park. And the beds that were here really were just split in half so that we could provide that access, both visual and physical. But we wanted to sustain the amount of planting that was in the park. And so we made plant beds on either side. Those also kind of help to give a human scale at the wide intersections that we have, but it also starts that experience of walking under the trees right from the intersection as well. The tree canopies are being lifted for better visibility. It's been a while since they've had their bottom limbs, and we always raised up, and we've always envisioned these to be very high canopy trees, as they are in many cities. These are London plane trees. They're great at growing in the city. They also have beautiful bark and kind of a dense leaf that's great at providing shade. So all of those things together, we hope, really improves the visibility into the park. And also while you're in the park, looking out from the park as well. So you kind of get to open space quicker in this design on each side. And this is what it would look like. So here is the existing wall. So we've cut it back in this location. And what we're doing is wrapping it around until it becomes a curb, and then it's going to become a flush curb on the park side so that people can get up and sit on the lawn that we're proposing. Likewise, on this side, we're putting curbs around the new plant bed. And again, they go to flush so that people can access the lawn. The lighting on the street will all stay and will be fixed. But I think the important thing to take away from this is just how much more transparent the park is going to be. This is a view taken from the crosswalk on 7th Street. We also, of course, looked at universal accessibility, making the park more comfortable and lively. And a park becomes lively when you give opportunities for people to occupy it, and also when it's safe. And so there are a couple of things. One is the bluestone pavers. We have been doing a lot of research, and I'll show you more details later about another type of bluestone pavement to use. We think it's important to retain the artwork that Ann Hamilton gave us on this piece, and so we're looking at using a bluestone type that is stronger, more smooth on its surface, and the pattern will have fewer joints. So it will, in fact, be much easier to move across. I mentioned the lawns for sitting. Those would be included in the end islands, as well as throughout the bed that is now really bare and in some places ground cover. So the idea is to take advantage of the fact that we're up looking over the river, and that this lawn can become a place for people to occupy. And, when there are events and, just in the everyday, it gives more variety. The more variety that you give to people, the better they use the space. We also are looking at new benches, tables, and chairs. These orange bars are new benches. We've tried to spread them out. We also are thinking about how people who are less mobile and how families and friends gather. This long bench was always a really important civic aspect, but we know that people use parks a little differently now. And so we've accommodated more opportunities to seat where you can face the existing bench or just create groups for yourself. We're also suggesting that new tables and chairs come into the park. We have to think about how those could be secured, or whether or not they just show up for events, but we're making room for them so that when decisions are made, we have space to put those activities. And this is a view on the inside, so you can start to see some of those benches, the tables and chairs, how the lawn will be sloped so you can look out over the river, the existing bench, and then a trace of what the paving might look like. As you can see, it's not nearly as fine-grained as the existing pavement. So I thought it would be helpful, landscape architects and architects always think that we draw everything so carefully that everybody understands exactly what we're doing. And I always find before and after images to be really helpful in explaining ideas. So this is the first view before in the middle of the park. And there's the second view, that's the one we just saw. So the difference is, of course, is the trees are lifted and there's much more activity or space for activity. Second view. and the after view. We're again extending the lawn to both places. We're making that place for people to cut through. So if you're walking in the park, you have the opportunity to take another route instead of going straight. That's going to help on activity days when I know that the right now that the public kind of streams over the existing wall. But you can see how taking out that wall really helps to open up those views back to the city. Another view from 9th Street, the 9th Street crosswalk, and then what that will look like after that bed is made. And again, notice the wall and how it goes down into a curb and then flush on the side. I think that what we're seeing in these sketches is that the city is going to be, the distant city and the near city are going to be much more visible. And so having the city and more eyes on the park is going to make a big difference. This is a before picture down at 7th Street, crossing the crosswalk. And this is what it would look like afterwards. Again, from 7th Street, looking down the corridor. And 7th Street after things have been restored or renovated. So there's that flush curve that can get you up. And again, that cut through that kind of helps you to see the city in the background, and of course the distant city as well. So now I'm going to talk about just a few details. Of course, when you make a landscape, the overall, what we call big moves are really important. The organization of a site, et cetera. But the thing that people really come in contact with and that makes a place that they love or don't love is how those materials and plantings and furnishings and lighting at human scale interact. So as I mentioned before, we're going to sustain the artwork. And on the two left photographs are actually the existing pavement. You can see that the thing that was so wonderful about it is the varied color and the pavement that we are suggesting on the right-hand side. So just a minute to talk about the difference between Pennsylvania bluestone, which is what is installed now, and New York bluestone, which is what we are proposing. This is a very small geology lesson, but there is a very large bluestone vein on the East Coast. And it starts around Pennsylvania, really just a little south of that, and goes all the way up through upstate New York. And the material is softer in the Pennsylvania area and much harder in the New York area because of the way that aggregation and the minerals that are present. And so while we were so intent on using a Pennsylvania bluestone, because of course, we're state or commonwealth like us, but we found that it wasn't as durable. It didn't hold up to some of the maintenance practices. We have since, on other projects, used the New York bluestone and have found it to be so much more durable than the Pennsylvania stone. It comes in a really beautiful range of colors, and we would look to do that as well. The colors are slightly darker than you find on the Pennsylvania stone, but I think it's a great trade-off that will still add a lot of character and substance to the park. We're also going to refresh the planting. We're going to add some spring color with putting some trees here are amelanchier trees or serviceberry trees, which have terrific flowers in fall color. Those will go into the end beds here and here. We're also imagining that the lawn, of course, which is in all of the beds, would have blush of crocus in the spring. Crocus are one of the first signs of warm weather to come, and I always find them hopeful when I see them in the landscape. And so we're going to put a lot of those in the lawn so that there's this flush of color early on. It'll be a signal to everybody that warm weather is coming, and they're easy to maintain. They simply are mowed down with the first mowing of the lawn. And then we think we want to put in some plants, some ground cover plants in the existing plant beds that are already in the plaza. And we're showing Japanese forest grass, but we're going to look for a native plant. I think the story of the forest grass is simply that we need something that is really tough, that can withstand the uses as well as the competition with the roots that are already established on those trees. One of the benefits of having a lawn is that we're not going to have to disturb the tree roots of the trees. The less we do, except give it a new healthy blanket of compost, the better those trees will behave. I also would like to call your attention on the left-hand side to the London plane trees. This is a park in New York, and one of the things I've always loved about this park is how high the plane trees have been limbed. And this isn't necessarily the end ambition, but you can see that you can create this kind of beautiful cathedral almost. And over time, it's certainly possible for the London plane trees in the parks to head that way. As I discussed, we're going to add more furnishings so that we create more places for people to come and visit. I went over the benches and the place for the trees. We're also going to repair all of the lights, which actually were recreated for the original park. They had been taken down, and we found the old drawings, the beautiful old drawings, and had them remade for the park. We hope to introduce color all year round through pops. You know, nothing can really bring in that great sort of eye level variety and, you know, liveliness than something that, you know, is put in a pot and changed over time. We can put in greens in the wintertime so that they don't sit empty. And then there's a look at the tables and chairs, and in the middle, the stone, kind of the form of the bench. This is a granite bench, but we're thinking of repeating the bluestone. And then last, the special lighting. We heard from many people that they wanted the park to have its own identity, and that lighting might be one of those devices to do that. And so we are proposing to use a light column, an LED light column, that, by the way, conforms to the night sky standards that are followed in every city now. But they would appear behind the bluestone bench, and again, we're placing them there so we don't disturb roots, and in the new plant beds. And on the right-hand side is actually a project of ours with much lower LED columns, but that's in Toronto. And then there's an example of them on a street in Texas. So we hope that all of these components together will help people to look at the upper level park and use it in different ways, and that it will be an engaging place for people to gather. We're going to open it up to you all. I look forward to questions and discussion about it. And I'll hand it back to you, Gavin, to monitor how that's going to work.
Sure. Thanks very much, Laura. So there's quite a few of us here today, which is great, but in order to try to be a little bit organized, if you could, let's maybe start with, I'll go through some of these questions in the chat, and then if you have a question that you'd like to ask audibly, then please raise your little hand there, hit the reactions button and click raise hand. But first, it looks like both Bill and Brian had questions about maintenance. And so I want to just briefly talk a little bit about that from our perspective. And then Laura, you may be able to say more about the grass in particular. But one thing worth noting is that as a part of the budget for this project, you know, we've heard loud and clear that there were some maintenance needs that just weren't being addressed. And frankly, we're outside of the city's scope, really, of their sort of core services. So we want to make sure that as a part of this budget, we're including a fund of at least $1 million that would each year be drawn upon in order to do those additional things like resealing the bluestone. I can't speak to the grass, and actually one of the reasons we chose that option is that is something that DPW really is quite good at maintaining. So they have standards and procedures for fertilization and aeration and all of that. And the portions of the park that are grass now are actually in pretty good shape. So anything else on the grass there, Laura?
Yeah, you just mentioned the area that is to the west of 6th Street. And as we were visiting the park twice now, last fall, one thing we noticed is that grass is actually in pretty good shape. And we know that it's pretty heavily used during activities in the summer. And you know, the grass is we think it's great to be able to sit on grass in downtown. That's a tradition that you see in a lot of city parks. And it made more usable space. But in terms of maintenance, yes, it's much easier to take care of. The first design had ground cover, and that didn't do so well. It started to develop patches, etc. And so we thought something that was simple, that if it had to be repaired, it would be a quick repair, and it wouldn't get in that state where people felt like the park wasn't being taken care of.
And Gavin, I'll just share a quick anecdote. You know, about a year ago, we hosted a session with Carol Brown, the former Pittsburgh Cultural Trust president and CEO, and Michael von Valkenburgh, Laura's colleague. And one of the questions I asked them was, you know, what are the lessons learned? And they both said almost in unison, maintenance, maintenance, maintenance. And so, you know, Riverlife taking on this project as lead insisted that we structure our budget for this project with $1 million care and maintenance sort of permanent financial instrument. So those funds have been secured, and as soon as this project is completed, those resources will be deployed to do, as Gavin noted, sort of the above city standard elements. So that's all.
Great. I'm going to jump to the next item, which was that there was a question about the fencing. Yes, actually, the county will be refurbishing that fence along the whole stretch as a part of their bridge restoration process. So that's already underway. We intend to keep the fencing as it is, though this is a slightly simplified rendering just for the purposes of computers, I think. The next question that got a little bit at some of these maintenance concerns. We talked about the funding source and then park rules. I mean, I think that really is a question for the city, but suffice it to say that there are rules and a signage standard that we'd intend to employ here, as well as a dog park at the far end of the park that we think we could probably do a better job of pointing people to, so that this is not serving as a dog park as a whole. Anything else on that front, Laura, or should we keep moving?
I think we've covered it.
Okay. Paige asks, will there be additional draining added to prevent the water from pooling? So short answer is yes,
Yes.
but in the detail. Yep.
So, so there is an existing drainage system, two drains, and we're going to add more drains to the edge of the railing, just in front of the railing, so that we can be sure that if one of those drains gets clogged, there's other drains that can back them up. So I think maintenance also has a role here of making sure that the drains don't get covered over, but I think having more will certainly help things as well.
Great. And in the same question, are the plantings native or naturalized to the area? I can say at least that the serviceberry is, and that other plantings, we're looking at those options for sure, right?
Yep.
Are dog waste stations a possibility? Conceivably, yes. Again, I don't know that we want to encourage this as used as a sort of dog park when there is the dedicated space at the far end of the site, but I think there's still plenty of time in general for conversation about amenities in the park that could be added. So duly noted. Greg asks, says this design looks great. Thanks. And what is the timeline for implementation? So probably a bigger and important note, which also addresses a question about the footprint of the park that I missed from Kevin, apologies, is this phase will address particularly these blocks of the upper plaza from 6th Street to 9th Street. We have imagined this as a part of a multi-phase process, and at a future date intend to look at the lower park as well as some possibilities of expansion into either Fort Duquesne Boulevard or 10th Street bypass. Those, we did a preliminary study, a traffic study, to determine that could in fact be possible, but there's more study to do. Again, we're being mindful of making sure that those cartways are efficient and getting people around appropriately, but are really excited about the possibilities of really expanding the footprint of this park into the downtown or down onto the river so that there is more space there as well. But those are going to be future phases. So this first phase would really just be what we've shown here today, which is the same footprint that we have.
Gavin, did you want to talk about the shorter term schedule for the upper
yes,
level?
thank you. So short term, all of this is based on permitting and funds and all of the things, but we're pursuing a design process that gets us to construction documents and gets us to a place where we can bid this project by the later this summer. So if that works out and we have a tight and reasonably snow-free construction season, our hope would be that this first phase of the project would reopen late spring of 2024. So again, to be determined, but those are the goals. Up next, Jared asks, will redbud trees be included? We did not include them in this design. We know they're across the riverfronts. But in this case, we thought that one of the key priorities here being visibility, that they would, because of their low growing nature, that they would perhaps be a hindrance to that effort.
I think we also thought about making sure that we had diversification in case, as we all learned, or the country learned from elm trees. Having some diversity of species will help if anything goes south.
Thanks, Laura. From James, have fixed stone tables and chairs been considered to avoid the wobbly nature of lightweight items on an uneven surface?
Well, we hope that the surface is pretty stable and it won't be nearly as, there are far fewer joints, and so the finish is also not nearly as textured as the existing stone. So I don't think we'll have problems with that. We've used this furniture elsewhere in several projects, and actually haven't had a problem with winds taking them, more with folks. So you got to be careful about that they can be a part of the securing or delivery during events. And I'm sorry, what was the question about benches, the other benches?
Just the question was, have fixed stone tables and chairs been considered? So I think there has been an inclusion of additional stone benches that could be more conversational in nature. But we've yet to think about stone tables, I will say.
Yeah, stone tables are a tough one. They unfortunately easily break because they get cantilevered, over the legs. And they're hard to repair. And so we really went with products that if something happened, could be easily replaced.
Mm-hmm. Okay, Pallavi's question, is there a way to guide the drainage into planting beds so that the stormwater can be cleaned and recharged into the ground? And I think short answer, we're still exploring that option. We know to Kara's follow-up question that we have to manage stormwater on site. We'll be following all the city and other permitting requirements, which would mean either some sort of subsurface treatment or storage or inclusion in these planting beds here. But I would think that the far end beds may present an opportunity there. I don't know if you've thought about that, Laura.
Yeah, and also the drainage behind the seat wall. We can work that area to make sure that all of the water that is coming off of that surface can be recycled and stay within the tree bed.
Great. Renee asks, does this footprint allow for programming similar to Allegheny Overlook? And I think I'd have to say that it doesn't quite. And I know that is a concern, right, in terms of being able to better program this space. I think the reality that we're coming up against is that this space is pretty confined, and that any major move that we consider includes the removal of a considerable number of the trees on site as it stands. And so, there are some possibilities for activating the ends of the park, but I think our hope is that the additional seating arrangements in the middle are a way to activate that, though they would not then offer the opportunity for like tenting and things like that. But we would still love to explore the possibilities of intermittently closing that portion of the boulevard to really expand the park and experience.
And I'll just say
we also go ahead, Matt.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think the thought for this phase is really not to preclude any future moves, and that in some ways this is a queuing up for that, and that if we do look at Fort Duquesne Boulevard as a potential place to borrow a lane or two, that we would welcome, I think, a larger sort of programming footprint if that were in play. But I think the challenge here was, as Gavin said, there is sort of the tree canopy and sustainability as a guiding principle, and we just felt like that was too much of a cost to bear if we're being consistent with that goal. So
we also, in fact, in the view that we're looking at on screen, we also did make sure that food carts could have a space to occupy on the corners if that was desired.
Great. Yep. Pallavi followed up with some concerns about the stormwater, especially if this stormwater is being discharged into the river without treatment. Let's make sure there's a way for it to be filtered in some way. So thank you and noted. We'll be sure to think about that in these next schematic phases. I'm not seeing anything else in the chat, except Carl just asked, any thought to providing restrooms on the town side of Fort Duquesne Boulevard? And I think for the same reason that we mentioned the difficulty in adding expansive space for programming, we would say that we'd have a hard time finding space on this site for restrooms, though we've certainly heard through conversations during the Completing the Loop process and others, and through the downtown town halls, that public restrooms are priority. So we'll continue to work with our partners on that, and would welcome any number of those businesses on Fort Duquesne opening up a bathroom for guests. And I believe that's Bruce asking about drinking fountains. And I think, again, so there, to my knowledge, Laura, please correct me if I'm wrong, there is not plumbing on site. So those are considerable costs if we're to entertain them, though, you know, we would be happy to do so if those are our top priorities for folks. Okay. Robin asks, what are the plans to keep all safe? And Laura, maybe you can talk a little bit about the sort of improved safety features as you see them in this updated design.
Yeah, one of the things that I think became a concern is visibility in and out of the park. And one of the things that can help that quite a bit is just raising the canopy of the tree so that you can easily see underneath. But it's also, as you can see in this this image, taking down that 85 feet of wall at the end opens up views quite a bit into the site. And you know, urban design principles really talk a lot about visibility as one of the factors that really helps with safety, eyes on the street, if you will. And so that really, it was sort of the number one thing that drove us in this design, which is opening up, making sure that it felt more airy and light, and that nobody could hide anywhere, that you would see somebody if they were doing something they weren't supposed to do. And again, by adding chairs and different seating, you know, you invite people in, and that tends to prevent bad actors from coming into a place that, you know, is occupied by citizens. You know, I think that another really important aspect to this, which we talked about, is maintenance, and we know that we have a commitment to that. But if someplace is being regularly maintained, you know, everybody kind of takes pride in that, and you know, contributes to sort of policing, if you will, behavior of others as well.
Great. Jeremy, I'm going to ask if you can to maybe speak a little further to your question about lighting, just because, you know, it'd be nice to hear other voices.
Sure. Thanks, Gavin. Jeremy Walter from the Downtown Partnership. I was just wondering about the vertical nature of the lighting, and it looks in this rendering like there's just a lot of vertical structures between the trees and the, I don't know, maybe 10 light poles that we're adding in the current light poles. I'm just wondering if you've seen this in another real world example, where I know that you showed these lights in more of a plaza-like setting or on streets, sidewalks, but I'm wondering if you've seen this other places and if there's any concern about just the number of vertical elements.
Yeah, I hear you. Thanks for that. You know, I think that showing the lights is certainly the upright lights, the standards, is one way to think about it. I think the message here, and we all know we need to do more thinking about the light. The message here is really that we need something special for these parks. We wanted to make sure that whatever it is, it's something different than what you see elsewhere in the city. And so this is just a gesture towards that. We also know that LED lights, you know, offer the ability to have different colors, or, you know, to be on during the day without a great expenditure of power. So I hear you, and that's a really great consideration, and we'll take that back with us. And if you have any terrific ideas for lighting, share them for sure.
Unfortunately, no. But I appreciate that. And I think just, the warmness of the light, I think will be important as you're wanting folks at night to stick around. And these seem very white.
Right.
So, just how do we kind of balance that?
Yep.
Great one. And Stephen made a comment that I think aligns with Robin's concerns here about the lights, which is to say that these lights or others would be helpful for that safety purpose, right? Because currently the lights that are there are not all functioning. And so adding light will be helpful, but particularly thinking about whatever light installation we make being something that improves that visibility and safety at night.
There are already 2 layers of existing lighting. These are the poles that I talked about that were part of the original project. They didn't exist before, and this doesn't do them justice at all. But these lights were broken the last time that I was in the park. And these lights, which are on the city side, on that space behind the wall, are still active. But I think that in all of these, we would look to make sure that they're energy efficient, whatever we do, and that they're dark sky compliant. It's 22 years or more since the park has been built. So standards were different then, but those are some of the concerns that we're thinking about as well.
And Gavin, I'll just share, I think the design of this space, the repositioning of this space is one dimension of a much larger suite of things that need to happen to ensure that folks feel safe in this space. And I think, the downtown partnership is on this call. The Cultural Trust is on this call. So there are nonprofit partners that we know we're going to be working with to program this space moving forward, which is a key part of that. But there's also, the intersections with the City of Pittsburgh and public safety and the Rangers program. And then at the county level, really dealing with the human service and social service side of what happens in parks. And so, I think we learned some lessons, and I think, speaking for the nonprofit partners here, I think we brought a vigilance and a competency to those conversations this year. And hopefully there have been lessons that have been learned that will inform us, I think, once this park is completed. So.
Okay, well, that's all I see in the chat, though. If I missed or misinterpreted something, please by all means speak up. Or if you have other things that have come up in that process, I'd say go ahead and unmute and ask away.
I got one more. This is Jeremy again. Any thoughts given to kind of vending in the space, creating possibilities for food carts to come in, maybe on busy weekends, to provide kind of light food and drink? I think access to power and water for those could be useful, and maybe a vending opportunity that the city might explore from a concession agreement to generate, nominal revenue, but also encourage kind of good behavior in the space versus, and putting eyes and ears that are there for a reason versus transient.
Yeah,
Thanks.
we have created rooms. We have created space for food carts. We've looked at, some arrangements to make sure that we're leaving enough paved space, and we've concentrated that space on the corners. Really, we're kind of looking at one of the spaces that we were thinking could have food carts. And your reminder that we need power and water is a good one. because that's really what makes one of those concessions work.
Yeah, I'll just add that those corners on all corners of this restoration or reconstruction are already approved vending sites from the city. So that, gives us, I think, more reason to look at those as, and think about the infrastructure there to support others. I know, it's reasonably common to see vendors there during Pirates games and other events, but otherwise it's not really utilized. So we'd like to improve that. Other questions or thoughts, big dreams that we ought to include?
Or funds that you want us to have. That's welcome too. Gavin, I'd love to say a few words in closing for our firm when you're ready.
I think.
Any other questions?
Go ahead. I'm not hearing anything or seeing hands or chats. So please go ahead, Laura. Thanks.
Great. Well, first, thanks to everybody for giving up a few hours of your afternoon. I know everyone is busy, but I also just wanted to share my firm's thanks for being asked back to look at the park. It's just such an honor to come back and be part of rethinking the upper level park as a way that it can serve the current condition of the city and the people who are in the downtown. So we just so appreciate that, and I hope that you will share any opinions you have with Riverlife, and they are a very good client. They really keep us on our toes, which is important. So thanks very much, and we'll look forward to taking on any other comments that come our way.
Yeah, thank you, Laura. We really appreciate all the work that you have done on this project so far, and we appreciate all of your input. We will post this video. I'll work with our friends at the City of Pittsburgh to see if we can get it on the Engage page for Allegheny Riverfront Park, and we may host it on our website as well. Pallavi has a lingering question here. Thoughts on the lower level park? I think the short answer is many, but ones that we've not explored in detail yet. But are really excited about exploring in future phases. Anything you'd like to share on that, Laura, as it relates at least to this upper restoration before we go?
No, I think we're seeing similar problems in the lower level, and I'm hoping that the upper level really just kind of sets the tone for how these landscapes can be engaged in the city.
Okay, final words from anyone else? Well, we thank you very much for your time today. Again, please feel free to reach out at any time with further thoughts or questions, and we'll be back to share the updated version of this plan later this year.